I know enough about markets. Forget numbers. I know enough about markets to know when everybody's having a good time, something is probably going to change.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for December 9th through December 16th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we featured the exclusive 2-ounce silver Canadian Rockies coin from the Royal Canadian Mint at just $3.49 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1-ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. And finally, 1/10 ounce gold Britannia are just $29.99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Jim Rogers, legendary investor, prolific author, co-founder of the Quantum Fund, founder of the Rogers International Commodity Index, and also Jim has been featured in practically every news outlet that you can think of. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
I am delighted to be here, Elijah, but it's a nice introduction, but I'm just a simple person.
Well, we really appreciate that, Jim, and thank you so much for your time today. I did want to first ask you about the U.S. economy, since obviously we've had an election recently, and one of the main reasons that seems like that the American people voted Trump back into office was they were hurting, right? We saw a lot of inflation. What are your thoughts on a second Trump administration and how it may impact the economy?
Well, first of all, the U.S. is going through the longest period in American history without a big problem, at least without a big problem in the stock market. So, hooray. Look out the window. Everybody's happy. The problem with that is it's been a very long time. And when everybody's happy for a very long time, it usually means something is going to make people unhappy. Whether that's a stock market decline or economic decline or both, I don't know. But I am certainly skeptical of the U.S. right now. I've sold my U.S. stocks, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. But I'm certainly worried and skeptical.
You mentioned how you've sold a lot of stocks recently. Can you walk our viewers through the signs you're seeing at the moment that are making you so skeptical?
First of all, it's the longest period in American history, which would make me raise questions or look for answers. Secondly, that's true of many stock markets in the world. It's rare that everybody's having a good time at the same time. That is another reason to be skeptical, or at least to ask questions. So, and as I look around, I see a lot of new people coming into the market, talking about how easy it is, how much fun it is, and you can make money. Easy money. Well, I've always learned to be skeptical of easy money. Now, wait, Elijah, let me make sure you understand. I like easy money. I would love a lot of easy money, but I've been around long enough to worry.
It definitely is concerning, and you've mentioned this before, that we're seeing really the debt, not just in the U.S., but around the world, explode, and we're seeing this debt crisis, and we can't kick the can down the road forever. We have to feel the pain at some time. I did want to ask you a bit more about the coming Trump administration, because the first time he was in office, we kind of saw business as usual when it comes to the economy. We saw more stimulus, more going into debt. So it doesn't seem like Trump is different on one hand if you just look at the first administration. But if you do look at some of the appointments he's making, it seems like he's going for anti-establishment, and he's bringing on Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to apparently cut a lot of the fat from government, cut the deficit. Your perspective on that, do you think we're going to see any real change this time?
I'm skeptical. I've heard this story before. I'm old enough to have heard many stories like this. I've read about this for many, many years. I'm skeptical, but hooray, if he does it, we'll probably all be better off, at least eventually. In the first stage, we might suffer, because whenever you do a lot of cutting, somebody suffers. But eventually, if he does it, and if he's successful, we'll all be better off. But I'm skeptical. I've heard it before.
Definitely. And one of the picks I did want to ask you about in Trump's cabinet is, well, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. He seems to be a fan of gold. He says gold is his biggest position. He's noting that central banks are accumulating gold. And interestingly enough, his connection with you, it sounds like he actually interned under you back in the day. Do you think that having someone like Scott, can he bring change in any way fiscally to the U.S. government?
Well, if nothing else, the very fact that he has these positions will cause people to discuss things that they might not have discussed otherwise, or might have just dismissed out of hand otherwise. So, yes, it's going to cause a discussion, if nothing else. And if there's a discussion, more and more people look at things like gold and silver, just because, if the high levels in Washington are talking about gold, people will too. They will think about it. So if nothing else, it's going to open more discussion, which we haven't had much of in a long time.
Now, with your personal experience working with Scott, can you say anything in particular that you think might change, or did you want to speak a little bit about having Scott intern under you, what that was like and what you learned about him?
Well, listen, it was a very, very long time ago. He knew nothing about the stock market, which is why he wanted an internship. He was enthusiastic and eager to learn. He's a smart kid. He went to Yale, after all. That seems to say he must be a smart guy. I just remember he was enthusiastic and eager, which is a good sign. And obviously something happened that he didn't become a journalist. He went into the markets.
And I know he learned a lot from you. In an interview that he did, he said that one of the things that you stressed when he was interning with you is research. And you focused on, when investing, do the numbers match really the story out there? You always wanted to do the research. Can you expand on that, your approach there, and how, and kind of your approach to investing?
Well, I've been investing a long time. I knew nothing when I started. I was worse than Scott probably, but I realized very early that the numbers were extremely important. You had to understand the numbers, especially because I found out that most people didn't pay attention to the numbers. They didn't really care. They just listened to hot stocks and hot stories, and that made people happy. I realized very early that I had to understand the numbers, that the numbers were extremely important. And so, for whatever reason, that's been a focus of mine ever since I began. I learned the hard way that you better understand the numbers, and I hope I still do.
Now, if you look at the numbers, right, where we are right now, you mentioned earlier in the interview that you have gotten out of the U.S. stock market. You're selling a lot. You've sold a lot of your positions elsewhere as well. Can you expand, I guess, and remind our viewers again, what about the numbers are giving you so much concern at this moment?
Well, Elijah, first of all, nearly every investment market around the world is at or near an all-time high. I know enough about markets. Forget numbers. I know enough about markets to know when everybody's having a good time, something is probably going to change. And of course, the reason things are at all-time high is because the numbers don't support the present price. Well, the numbers, in theory, don't support the present prices. So that makes me skeptical. Does it mean I'm right? No. Oh, Scott, I make many mistakes in my life, many mistakes. But I do know that at the moment, nearly all markets are making new highs, and that is often a cause for concern. Often, not always.
Well, your track record has definitely proven that whatever mistakes you've made, they're hardly noticeable, and you've learned from them. I did want to ask you about, I guess, as we look into this crisis that we're going to be having with the debt, and if we are going to see a stock market crash because things are so overvalued right now, what does that mean for the average person, right? I mean, we have people listening to this show who are, just middle class. We have people who are upper class, right? So we have a wide range of viewers. But I wanted to ask you, like, if people are hurting right now, which it sounds like a lot of people are doing very well. Stock markets are at all-time highs. But at the same time, obviously, Trump's reelection shows that some people on Main Street are really hurting right now with inflation and all of that. So for maybe the people on Main Street, how will this impact them really financially if we do see this crisis?
If you're looking back at history, every time there's been a stock market decline, I didn't say crash, you said crash, but I'm talking about decline, a serious decline. It has hurt many and it has hurt most investors. Some people, of course, do well, but nearly always when there's a long, big stock market decline, most investors suffer. So my advice, please, to everybody, only invest in what you yourself know a lot about. Everybody right now wants and is eager to have a hot tip. Be skeptical of hot tips. Hot tips can ruin you and probably will ruin you. So just be very, very careful and be very skeptical.
If we do see this kind of crisis, you've mentioned commodities are a good option. You've mentioned agriculture are a good option. What are the things that you're looking at right now in particular?
Well, I've mentioned those things because they're somewhat depressed. I mean, you were well educated, but how many people you went to school with wanted to be farmers? Probably very few people. The number of farmers, not just in the U.S., but in the world, is declining for whatever reason. So I know that there are going to be problems in agriculture in the future for many reasons. And that's one reason I'm optimistic. I like to find things that are depressed. And if agriculture is depressed, I at least want to look and see if there are opportunities, and there often are. So that's one of the things that's depressed. Some commodities are depressed for whatever reason. So I like to look. I'm sure your parents taught you to buy low and sell high. I like to look at things that are low.
We have an interesting aspect here, right? If you look at precious metals, gold is also at an all-time high, just as are many stock indices. As we've seen this rally in gold over the last year or so, does it give you caution, or what is your outlook for the yellow metal?
Well, I own gold. I have owned gold for many years. I've never sold any gold, and I hope I'm smart enough to buy more gold. I hope that my children have my gold sometime. But if I were buying precious metals today, I would buy silver. Silver is much cheaper on a historic basis. I own both. If I were buying one today, I would be buying silver. Both have a long history of being valuable to the world. Both have a long history of being profitable or helpful during crisis. And people have known about gold and silver for centuries. I mean, the U.S., for instance, was founded on a silver standard in 1792. We changed later to a gold standard, as did many people in the world, but silver has a huge value. You remember, Jesus Christ was sold for 30 pieces of silver, not for 30 pieces of gold, because silver has had a long history of value. I own both. If I were buying one today, I would buy silver, to repeat.
I've heard also that, the word silver is money in a lot of languages. Silver is the people's money. But in your view, it seemed, why do you think central banks are not focusing also on silver? It seems like they're mainly purchasing gold at the moment.
Good question. Gold has better PR. I don't know. Gold is, as I said, much of the world in the last few decades has been a gold standard. After the Second World War, especially, the world was all on gold. So I guess that's the answer. I don't have a good answer. My only answer is I own both. I'm not smart to know which is better.
Do you anticipate a return to some sort of precious metal standard? Do you think as we see this crisis unfold that the people and also governments will have to turn back to gold as currency?
I know that throughout history, people have often tried to return to a gold or silver standard when there are big problems. The main answer is it's never worked. That's why we're not on a gold standard now, because it never was successful. But when people have serious problems, they try gold standard, silver standard, whatever. So it's a very good chance that if we have a serious problem in the world, people, especially a currency problem, serious currency problem, people will start talking about a gold standard again. I own it. Whatever they talk about, I own gold.
I did want to turn our focus now to geopolitical conflict. We've been talking a lot about the financial issues in the world, but also there's a whole lot of geopolitical conflict. If you look at in the Middle East, or if you look at Russia and Ukraine, recently the U.S. has, given the green light for Ukraine to use U.S.-made long-range missiles into Russia. Your perspective about the escalation that we've seen in the Ukraine-Russian war, and how do you think it may impact things financially?
Well, if you look back before the First World War, there were lots of things like this going on. Wars here, wars there, small wars scattered around, and they eventually became a big war. Unfortunately, history shows that's the way the world works. People start with a small war, nobody pays attention, and the next thing you know, it's on the evening news. When it's on the evening news, it's too late. So I am very worried and very skeptical. That's one reason I don't own shares in much of the world, because I hope that this does not escalate into war. But in Washington, they seem to like war at some periods, and the rest of the world gets involved too. I would suggest that there might be more war in the next decade. Be worried. I am worried anyway.
It definitely is concerning that things are escalating so quickly now. Now, when it comes to financially, it seems like war is often also a way to maybe get out of a financial crisis. Could war be an excuse maybe for a financial crisis, or a way to potentially for the government to get out of one?
That's not the way governments talk. They will say, "Oh, Elijah, don't you know those people are evil, horrible, vicious, disgusting people. We must protect ourselves and we must save the world." That's the way the people will talk if and when that happens. It's not because people are evil, vicious, disgusting people. It's because people in the capitals get excited and try to save themselves, try to protect themselves, try to encourage their own positions. If you look back at every war, the politicians always say the same things. They talk about how evil the other people are. And they always say, "Elijah, don't worry, it'll be over soon. The boys will be home by Christmas." If it's a Christian nation, the boys will be home by Christmas. The boys ain't ever home by Christmas, but the politicians always say they will.
Now, coming full circle here, back to focusing on the U.S. debt situation, you've noted before how the U.S. debt situation really parallels what happened in the UK, right? There was the UK had such influence in the past, but now they don't. The U.S. seems to be the world's most powerful nation, right? But what is the trajectory for the U.S. if we don't get off this endless spending spree?
Just give a quick summary. In 1924, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number two. But 50 years later, in 1976, Britain went bankrupt, literally bankrupt. IMF had to help them pay their bills. That happened in 50 years to the number one country. It's happened often in history that countries get out of control. I see the debt skyrocketing in the U.S. I don't see how. I can add and subtract. Elijah, I don't see how we can ever pay the bills, how we can ever pay the debt. And that always in history has led to problems. Someday somebody has to say, what do we do? And usually what they do is they print more money, which is not good for any country, although the politicians at the time always say, this is good for you. It's the evil foreigners we have to worry about. It's not loyal, faithful, good standing American citizens. It's the evil foreigners or whatever countries is concerned.
Printing currency really only pushes the pain down the road. And, you see inflation maybe instead of, a traditional crash. It seems like really there's no easy way out of this.
Well, you have enough perspective or enough knowledge to know that it doesn't work. But that's not what they say when it's happening in the government. The government always says, this is a short-term measure. It's temporary, and it's the way it's going to be good for you, citizens, loyal citizens. And we're only worried about the foreigners, the evil, horrible foreigners. It's not our citizens that are at fault. It's the evil foreigners. And it's only temporary. Don't worry. It will be good for you in the end. I mean, I can write the speeches. I know what they're going to say.
Definitely a lot of words of warning for our viewers. And it's important to be aware and prepared. And that's the reason we're here, is to get expert insights from people like yourself, Jim. And we really appreciate your time today and really helping our viewers be, again, aware and prepared for what's coming. I guess if we wanted to leave you with your final thought, I was wondering maybe what are you most excited for these days, and what are you most optimistic about?
Well, I own shares in very few countries in the world anymore, because most stock markets or most investment markets are doing well. That makes me ask questions. It makes me skeptical. So I am not very keen on most stocks in the world. If I look around, things like agriculture are still somewhat depressed. Some commodities are still somewhat depressed. I mean, oil is certainly well down from its all-time high. So is silver. There are some things that might be good places to look. I just repeat, Elijah, I try to look for things that are depressed. That's where I start. Doesn't mean I will invest in them, but I usually do not look at things that are at an all-time high unless I'm thinking about selling short. I look at things that are depressed.
Fantastic. Well, Jim Rogers, we really appreciate your time as always. You have a fantastic week. Any last thoughts before we let you go?
Be careful. Be worried. Everybody should be worried and be careful. And if you're worried and if you're careful, you'll probably come out okay.
Fantastic. Jim, once again, thank you so much for your time today, and God bless.
Thank you, Elijah. Happy New Year.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for December 9th through December 16th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we featured the exclusive 2-ounce silver Canadian Rockies coin from the Royal Canadian Mint at just $3.49 over spot per ounce. We also feature the limited edition 2024 1-ounce gold UK Lion and Eagle coin at just $99 over spot per ounce. And finally, 1/10 ounce gold Britannia are just $29.99 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.